This is the Bonneville Salt Flats. This is Mother Nature's racetrack, and when it's not spending most of the year being a lake, you might be lucky enough to get a couple chances to race on it. Might be. In some years, no chances at all. There's no weekly test in 2 nights. And the race vehicles are wide open throttle for minutes, not seconds.
What do you got here, Mad Max Beyond Dumpster Dome?
So if you're going to have someone build you a race car, a good choice would be to go to someone who's got a reputation for building a car, rolling it out of the trailer, and breaking records with it.
We're going to turn out early. We're just going through the 4.
Okay. Well, if that's all it takes to get your record, screw it. Right?
We was at the quarter yesterday.
282, long course, quarter mile, 235.495. Middle mile, 255.659. That qualifies them for a return run.
And let me think, you just came on long course yesterday, right? Yeah. Show off.
But is Troy really that good?
No. We're good preparation.
Yeah.
Right. Best to remain humble. This is Matt Jewell, and he's about to put that question to the test. He's been trying to break the XFGR class record for years.
It's a gas roadster, naturally aspirated Flathead.
But he couldn't quite crack that top speed. Though it wasn't for lack of trying, this is just simply one of the hardest records to break out at Bonneville.
We knew that it might be a decade-long project.
And what makes it unusually difficult? The engine. Unlike that car, the XF class relies on a Ford or Mercury Flathead V8 produced from 1932 to 1953, with a maximum displacement of 325 cubic inches. And you have to use the original block, meaning that the newest one you could even build would be around 70 years old. And even though the Flathead is a hot rod icon, it wasn't all that powerful, especially by today's standards. So why go after such a difficult class?
I like the history behind it. It's probably essentially an 80-year-old class. Guys have been doing this same type of thing for that long, ever since the Flathead Ford came out. It was kind of the hot rod engine, of the time, and I just like the number of people that have attempted this and the difficulty of the class.
Good enough for me, and accomplishing something difficult always feels better than going after that low-hanging fruit. Matt's journey back to the Salt actually started when he brought his killer 33 Highboy to Rad Rides for some mechanical work. His fondness for the Flathead actually led him here in pursuit of one thing in particular: the intake manifold from Roger Ritzau's very award-winning 32 Roadster. But there's only one, and it's not for sale. Luckily for Matt, that wasn't going to be a problem because Rad Rides was up for the task of making a duplicate for his 33. It started in much the same way as the one on Roger's car, with an antique aftermarket 8-stack injection that was modified and then partnered with a billet base plate that houses much of the fuel delivery and some of the electronics. This type packaging even put some of the components down in the engine's valley. Now that's what I call a proper use of space. Oftentimes making something look this simple actually takes a lot more work than you think.
Now you have 4 pairs that you have to balance out, and between those pairs you got to make sure those are balanced, and then once you get all of them to flow evenly, then you have to get all of them to go. So it can be very time consuming.
And the result is this fantastically understated 8-stack injection that appears to only run on air. And it looks right at home in the engine bay of a car from the 30s. Once all the work was done on Matt's 33, it was time for his 32 to enter the building. It showed up sans engine because Rad Rides was going to build a new one for it and turn this little roadster into an ass kicker.
The Flathead class at Bonneville is that nostalgic thing that everybody wants. It's only a 160-mile-an-hour record out there, but it carries a lot of weight. Track conditions are huge in this class too, because you're working with limited horsepower. Most of these cars in that era are terrible aerodynamically, you know. And then if you've got a loose track, now you've got more drag.
Yeah.
So it's kind of got to get all the stars to line up right. The one way to solve this whole problem is put boost to it, obviously, but that's not this class.
Yeah,
so it really makes it tricky, and so it's a really tough class, honestly. So our approach on it is to, you need a certain CFM to make the power, do the math, blah, blah, blah. So what we've done is we cut a flathead in 4 pieces, and then we've done some machine work to it here, and we've actually switched the intake and exhaust valve, which a lot of guys have done that. That's not something super tricky, but then with different valves, we're trying different shrouding, different cutting here. And then this is our intake port shape that we're just messing with right now. And we pressed it into the block and then did a little body work in there just to get some flow numbers, just to see. Air in, air out's what we're looking for right now. So we took I think we went 5 heads, we flowed on the bench, and just to get the best number to start. Okay, here's what everybody's running if you don't get real creative. Here's the numbers. And we had Lawrence design this cylinder head thing. Him and Bob talked. So we made, and the reason we did it out of acrylic, obviously it looks pretty cool, but when it's on the flow bench, you can actually see how it's acting around the valve and stuff. The biggest change we did is there's a big undercut right here where it goes around the valve, because before, when it was coming up on those cylinder heads, the valve come right here and it barely cleared, so it was shrouding there. Air couldn't get around it, so we really undercut it here, and so we'll see, but that's the type of effort it takes in this class. You have to really have the right customer that understands it to spend the R&D time to, because if you don't get this CFM number here on an engine like this being naturally aspirated, you're never going to get there. Sure. I don't care what you do.
Next step for Troy was to head to FX Engines to talk to the owner, Bob, or as I like to call him, Bob the Builder. Now, they've worked together on multiple projects, and I love it when they get their heads together because they have made some of the coolest engines come to life that have ever existed. But what they needed to see now is if they could get the cubic feet per minute numbers they needed to make the power for Matt's Roadster. They'll use Bob's flow bench to test the acrylic head and see if they can get to that magic number of 150.
We got about 110 CFM right now, which...
What do we start at?
90 or 80
Baseline.
80 something. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, and I was sort of hoping we'd get a jump to 150 or something, but
Yeah.
it's slow.
Then accepting means they accept modifications involving intake and exhaust.
After some preliminary testing, it was back to the drawing board because they were still in need of about 40 CFM.
I mean, there's other things we can still do. There's, we can move the valve guides over. There's a lot of things we can do to pick up little bits and pieces, but I don't see 40 CFM coming easy.
I think the next move, then, you can obviously do the spacer plates just to see. Hell, you never know.
One thing Troy does not know how to do is give up. He used to tell me to tighten every bolt through every step of the process because one loose bolt was one variable unaccounted for. It took me a while to understand it, but in life I found it to be great advice. He brought some spacer plates with him to mimic various head gasket thicknesses so that once they got the flow numbers they wanted, they could see what the side effects would be once these tolerances were introduced. They decided to stack them all together before pursuing more drastic measures, and what they got in return was a very good surprise.
144 CFM.
No fucking way. Wow, that's a big jump.
We went subsonic there.
Every deer within 27 miles of this place just ran into the front of a semi.
Well, we'll hope that's not entirely true. They definitely made the world's loudest deer whistle, and they were definitely on the right path. Now that they had the combustion chamber shape figured out, it was time for Lawrence to multiply that by 8 and start creating the cylinder heads from nothing. They weren't out of the woods completely, though. They're well aware that there's a trade-off between compression and CFM that was going to be there till the end. They did, however, have enough data to start making parts. Some of the first parts to move from the computer screen to reality were the exhaust manifolds. They were cut from 4 solid chunks of stainless steel. They were carved out as stainless because of its ability to heat cycle, and it doesn't rust. They were then bolted on top of a mock-up engine made of plastic so construction of the headers could begin while machining was being done on the real engine. Since the exhaust already has a dedicated exit point, the headers would be made up first to help determine where the rest of the parts would live. The intake manifold was next. Now keep in mind that the intake and exhaust valves have been swapped, and the old exhaust that ran through the block has all now been sealed. Some of the machining done to the block actually connected the intake valve to the base of the intake manifold, as these areas were never in the block before. That's why all of the air that now enters and exits the engine does so between the heads above the engine's valley. The heads were machined as 2 pieces, and with a half separated you can see the massive water jackets that will help cool the combustion chamber. All this technology is making me hungry. Where you been? It's been months. And I didn't want you all to forget about Chief. COVID restrictions have kept him at home, but I was happy to see that Troy still brings his old buddy some lunch.
Tell Adam about them hamburgers I brought you? The box of hamburgers?
Oh yeah, I brought that.
Whole suitcase? How many did you eat?
Audio Jungle.
Back at the shop, they went to town on the oil pan. Aftermarket improvements to seals over time, combined with Troy's genius, allowed him to convert the Flathead to have the front main seal from a big block Chevy and the rear main seal from this old 6-cylinder. The factory seals in the Flathead are terrible, and I know Troy cannot stand leaky engines. Well, the list of modifications to this engine are just getting too numerous to mention, and there's only 2 weeks before the salt. That means I gotta head home and get ready. These guys gotta finish up. The day finally came for us to head to Bonneville.
Those cattle know something we don't. They're going to something good.
They're getting to high ground so they can see what the hell we're stuck in traffic for.
48 degrees, 38% humidity, station pressure is 25.98, no winds.
Troy and his gang only beat us to the salt by 1 day. But I think it's safe to say that Dale might have already gotten too much sun.
That's right.
Good morning, Jared. How are you?
I'm a little creeped out right now. You got it going on Bossa Nova.
Bossa Nova.
That's probably best.
Yeah, you're probably right. Whatever he was going to say would have to be edited.
With no time for a dyno run, the tune was set up with Bonneville in mind. That means accounting for the altitude and the atmosphere while guessing at the engine's RPM ceiling. That also left some question about the car's final drive gear ratio. As the race officials poured over the car to make sure that everything was up to their standards for safety, Troy and his team knew that there was only one place where they were going to get all of their questions answered. On the racetrack. So it was prime time to take the car to the starting line.
There we go.
I have to say, this is probably my favorite place to be on the Salt Flats. Anyone who's even remotely into cars would just lose their minds here. There's so much cool machinery, so many things to look at. I mean, cars and motorcycles of every shape and size, all designed for one thing, going really fast. Matt and his crew seemed pretty confident as they approached the starting line. I mean, they've been here before, but this time they had to be a little bit anxious. They were running an engine that has only ever been started, never fully tested, and anything could go wrong at this point. So it looks like it just comes down to making the run and seeing what would happen.
Jim Webb on the race course right now with the 527.
At Bonneville, there's a short course and a long course, and the short course is generally reserved for race vehicles that won't quite break 175 miles an hour by the time they reach the 2.25 mile marker, often called the quarter. Now that can be a little confusing to the fans of drag racing out there. And cars that run faster than 175 by the 2.25 mark go to the long course after qualifying on the short. And for record runs, the cars first need to qualify. In other words, they need to break the mile per hour for the old record. Once they qualify, they're impounded until the next morning, where they try to go as fast as they can. If those two speeds, once combined, are averaged out to be faster than the old mile per hour, they are the new record holder. Matt's first run was a test run and was still only slightly off the mark. Matt is a veteran race car driver and he's a man with a cool head. Especially during the first run, that's the kind of person you want in the driver's seat. He knows how hard he can push the machine to get what he needs out of it without causing unnecessary damage. Even with all the sensors in the world, the right drivers needed to help tell the story and decide just how far to push the envelope. It's even more ideal when they own the car. Matt's second run started off strong, but it became clear that something wasn't quite right.
All right. Switched it off, coasting down, hasn't yet turned out. That was a 4814 car. Jewell Racing, Matt Jewell from Mittendorf, Iowa. Shut it off and is coasting down. At what, the 1.5 or so.
Hey Matt, shoot, we almost made it to the pit. Oh, I was gonna push you. How'd it go?
Matt started laying down all of a sudden.
Uh-oh.
I shut it off. It was pulling good, and I got it into fifth.
Mm-hmm.
And then at about 5,800, it just kind of, so I don't know. It seemed like fuel.
You're 152 right there.
Yeah.
So it was just getting going.
Even though Matt had to pull back on the first run, Troy and Dale didn't even break a sweat.
Before we were up the strap bar?
Yeah, we were right about there.
So it came around a strap bar?
Came right around, yeah. That's where your timing is.
After the run, Matt reported a seat of the pants feel for the car. This was combined with the data they retrieved from all the sensors that they had, and now had a clearer picture of what they needed to do next. Matt said the car pulled hard all the way to 6,000 RPM, and that his last flathead started to run out of breath at around 4,500. This means they definitely needed a gear change. Also, as mentioned before, the car has no onboard computer that's making those split-second adjustments that optimize engine performance. That means their adjustments are all the more critical. They are mechanical only in nature and hard set. After examining the plugs, they decided that the next move was to lean out the fuel mixture a little bit and try again.
Pretty good.
With a fresh set of plugs, a new rear gear, and a little more timing, the crew was cautiously optimistic. Conditions on the track were about as good as they were going to get, and it was a great day to make a run for the record.
Hell yeah. He's got it, baby.
Almost 166. Awesome, baby.
Good job.
165 something.
He was jumping back and forth between 65 and 66 from the 2 to the 3.
Was it? Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of dogged it when I went into fifth a little bit.
Did it? Like
It was still pulling.
Yep.
And I almost thought about just leaving it in fourth because it was going pretty good.
Yep.
Yeah. Congratulations. Good job. Good job. Yeah. Awesome.
Even with a record-breaking run under their belt, Matt and the crew aren't quite out of the woods yet. Because you see, at Bonneville, the rules require that it has to be done twice. That's what makes this so hard. I've seen some amazing runs never make it to the record books because they weren't able to back it up. So tomorrow, for Matt and the team, it's do or die.
Thank you.
We got there, Adam.
Mile 3 is 165, 242.
Nice.
So that's faster than yesterday, I think. I'm not good with numbers. But he got the record. That is awesome. Nice job, guys.
Jumping. That was awesome. It's a half mile an hour off of yesterday.
I know.
Yep.
So cool.
That was awesome.
You want to win? Just come see the right people.
That's right, man. Yeah, man. Yeah, man. It's impossibly easy.
Yeah, right.
You the man, Jewell. Woo! Woo! You the man, baby. Man, it's better than your drag car was 165.2 instead of 160 or no 150. Yeah, 165.2. Awesome job, buddy.
That's no brakes.
Yeah, I'm like, this fucker's, he's barely past the trailer this time. He sprint carted over here. Awesome job, man. Beautiful.
As I mentioned earlier, no one's perfect, but your best bet if you want to win is going to someone that has a reputation for winning. In this case, it paid off, and I have a lot of respect for Troy's clients because they're the necessary ingredients for pushing the boundaries of what's possible after the factory's done with something. I'll bet there's a lot of people who never thought they would see a naturally aspirated, mechanically injected Flathead make the kind of power that it needed to make to put that new number up for the record. But thanks to all of the people involved, we got to see that on this episode of Rad Rides. And I've got a sneaking suspicion that we haven't seen the last of Matt Jewell and his little silver roadster.